Tonight, an American detained in North Korea as Israel's president visits the White House. Plus,
half of the world's population are not able to practice their faith freely.
Religious freedom on the line. And
the United States has an opportunity to surge ahead of Beijing if we are aggressive and deliberate.
The promise and perils of artificial intelligence.
While AI offers all this promise and more, it also has serious national security risks.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
An American soldier detained in North Korea. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder.
Good evening in Washington. I'm John Jessup. Tonight, diplomatic discord between a friend and a foe. The strained bond between Israel and America on full display while the totalitarian regime of North Korea is holding an American soldier hostage.
Officials say 23-year-old Private Travis King crossed over the border between North and South Korea willingly and without authorization. He's the first U.S. citizen detained by North Korea in nearly 5 years.
CBN White House correspondent Abigail Robertson is at the White House as U.S. armed forces in Korea say they are working with their counterparts in North Korea's military to resolve the unusual incident. Abigail.
Well, John, King was reportedly due to face disciplinary actions by the U.S. military, and he was supposed to be heading back to the United States when he wound up on this inter-Korean border tour. And he apparently was not wearing his uniform on the tour. And one witness told CBS News that he laughed and ran through 2 buildings heading towards North Korea, and then he didn't come back. And this is very early. We're still waiting to hear more information, but here's what Defense Secretary Austin had to say earlier today.
We're closely monitoring and investigating the situation and working to notify the soldiers next of kin and engaging to address this incident. In terms of my concerns, I'm absolutely foremost concerned about the welfare of our troops.
And apparently in the area he was touring, the boundary lines are very clear, and it's not a place that you accidentally wander into the wrong country, and it's a place patrolled by UN forces, many of which are US forces.
All right, Abigail, we'll continue to follow that story, but also making news is President Biden's meeting at the White House today with Israeli President Isaac Herzog, a visit that stirred up a lot of questions about why Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu wasn't also invited. What can you tell us about that?
Well, Jenna, earlier this week, ahead of President Herzog's visit, the White House finally did issue that long-awaited invitation for Prime Minister Netanyahu to meet with President Biden. Now, we're hearing that meeting will likely take place in the fall, though we don't know when it will be. And today, with President Herzog in the White House, President Biden reiterated what he said was his deep, long-time love for the country of Israel. And he told the Israeli president that he believes there is a lot that the two countries can do if they work together to bring more stability and peace in the Middle East. Take a look.
America's commitment to Israel is firm, and it is ironclad. And we're committed as well to ensure that Iran never acquires a nuclear weapon.
Now, President Herzog will speak to a joint session of Congress on Wednesday to commemorate the 75th anniversary of Israel's statehood, though some House Democrats plan to boycott the speech.
Abby, staying on the topic of the Middle East, the Pentagon recently announced plans to boost security in the region. This comes after an uptick in Iran seizing commercial ships or attempting to seize those ships passing through the area. Abby, what can you tell us about that?
Well, earlier this week, the Pentagon announced that they're going to be sending a warship and fighter jets to the region. And it's to give air cover for commercial ships moving through the waterway in hopes of deterring Iran from seizing or firing on any more commercial vessels. And the U.S. Navy says Iran has seized 5 commercial vessels in the last 2 years and harassed about a dozen others. So they hope that this increased U.S. presence will deter future incidents. John?
All right, Abigail Robinson at the White House. Thank you so much, Abby.
All right, thank you, Abby. And now to former President Trump and the special counsel investigation into efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Trump says he received a letter from special counsel Jack Smith letting him know he's a target in the investigation. This indicating Trump will likely be indicted. On his Truth Social platform, Trump writing, "This witch hunt is all about election interference and a complete and total political weaponization of law enforcement."
Turning now to Capitol Hill, where lawmakers are taking a serious look at rising attacks on religious freedom abroad.
Yeah, there was a hearing today that had bipartisan support. CBN News Washington correspondent Hillary Powell joins us with more on that. Hillary.
John and Jenna, House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee leaders say they're more concerned than ever about religious persecution worldwide. Half of the world's population can't freely practice their faith. That's why there's a call for America to apply more pressure on 2 specific countries about adhering to human rights. The world's largest democracy, India, called out for its increasing religious nationalism. Testifying about these conditions, the bipartisan U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. Rabbi Abraham Cooper declaring the State Department is not on the same page when it comes to Nigeria and India. In a joint press conference last month, President Joe Biden gave India's prime minister a chance to defend democracy, saying there's no place for religious discrimination. Committee leaders urged the State Department to designate Nigeria, India, and Vietnam as countries of particular concern. Violations of the International Religious Freedom Act can make them subject to U.S. sanctions. Some hope and progress. USERF applauds the State Department's public condemnation of 2 key countries for increased religious persecution in 2022, Nicaragua and Vietnam.
All right, CBN's Hillary Powell. Thank you so much, Hillary. Well, for more now, we have Tony Perkins, the Vice Chair of USERF and President of the Family Research Council. Tony, welcome to you. So we learned half of the world's population cannot freely practice their faith. Tony, how is that even possible? How is it that religious freedom threats rather to religious freedom is on the rise?
John, it's been growing for decades, and we actually saw kind of a brief reprieve, I guess, if you will, during the Trump administration for this reason, is that what America prioritized, other nations pay attention to, and the #1 foreign policy objective coming out of the State Department during the tenure of Donald Trump was religious freedom under Secretary Mike Pompeo. Now, what we have now is you have an administration that is not putting faith at the forefront of our foreign policy. In fact, it was reported that Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who I actually met with, talked with about Nigeria, because we had succeeded in putting Nigeria on the list of countries of particular concern during the Trump administration, only to have it removed by the Biden administration. But Secretary Blinken, when he talks to his counterpart in Saudi Arabia, he says, every time I talk to him about the priorities of the LGBTQ community. They're not talking to them about religious freedom, so we should not be surprised that the rest of the world is allowing the persecution of Christians and others to continue to go forth, because essentially this administration is giving a green light to it by not prioritizing it.
Yeah, as you say, America does set the tone. Tony, so today's hearing called out India, Nigeria, of course, but Chairman Smith also pointed to China with the most comprehensive destruction of religious communities in decades. What more should the U.S. be doing to support religious freedom in China?
Well, again, it's in all of our conversations. We just had 2 officials. We had the Treasury Secretary, we had the Secretary of State in China. Were these issues discussed? We don't know that they were. They certainly were not on the record as being discussed, and I doubt that they were discussed. I'm grateful for Chairman Chris Smith putting such focus on this. He and I talk almost every week about these issues of religious freedom. I'm grateful we have a Congress that is focusing on it, but it's not a priority for this administration. The American people need to know that America is a leader. And what we prioritize, the rest of the world pays attention to. And with this increased hostility, in particular, as I focus on the Christian population, it is at historic levels. And America has a responsibility to focus on this.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Tony Perkins of the Family Research Council, thank you so much for your time and your insights tonight.
Thanks, Tony.
Thanks, John. Jenna.
Well, the race to get ahead of China and other U.S. adversaries in AI tech is on. See who's winning next.
Well, no surprises here. In the race for military dominance, the use of artificial intelligence on the battlefield is both a major and potentially scary goal.
Experts testified before the House Armed Services Committee today on AI's capabilities and best practices for using machines to save military lives. CBN's Brody Carter has more on that. Brody?
Well, attempting to make laws that put in safeguards for AI, legislators discussed 3 potential outcomes of using AI in combat. First, it could increase the destructive power of modern warfare. Second, AI also has the potential to lessen that power. And finally, the possibility that machines could unilaterally take power and go beyond our ability to control them.
The country that is able to most rapidly and effectively integrate new technology into warfighting wins.
Founder and CEO of Scale AI, Alex Wang, says the U.S. is already behind in the artificial intelligence race.
China is investing the full power of its industrial base for AI. This year, they're on track to spend roughly 3 times the U.S. government on AI.
And he should know because the Pentagon is a major customer. It awarded his company, Scale AI, a $250 million contract to help the U.S. military develop and deploy AI technology, including a decision-making tool called Donovan and robotic combat vehicles.
Intelligence algorithms have made data significantly more valuable than they have in the past. Everyone within the DoD needs to understand that data is actually the ammunition in an AI war.
Wang testified Tuesday that the U.S. should combine military data with current AI technology to establish a foundation for long-term success. The Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Office is a relatively new defense branch responsible for training artificial intelligence models, developing new military capabilities, and conducting threat analysis while making decisions, including the taking of human life.
It's certainly true that most of the exquisite capabilities that the DoD looks to build are likely to be developed at the secret or top secret level.
And without that development, experts agree the U.S. risks losing global influence, tech leadership, and democracy to strategic adversaries, including China.
And it's really important that your government and industry work together to realize those promises and to mitigate those threats.
As lawmakers work to bolster the military's artificial intelligence.
So this is a genie that can't be put back in the bottle.
Others warn average Americans need to prepare for a changed workforce.
And what's interesting about AI is that the jobs it is going to replace are not factory workers and industrial workers as much as white-collar workers. And so we need to start thinking about what impact will that have on our society, and what are these new jobs that might be created as a result of this.
And education is key because some lawmakers admittedly don't even know what Twitter does, let alone the capabilities of artificial intelligence. For those lawmakers that are governing AI, the key is quickly implementing this technology while also keeping it controlled as the U.S. fights to keep up with China. John and Jenna, back to you.
All right, Brody Carter, thank you very much. And Gordon Lawson is the CEO of cybersecurity company Conceal and a U.S. Naval veteran. Gordon, great to have you with us this evening. So what did you make of today's hearing and what we just heard? China will spend 3 times as much on AI as the U.S. this year.
Well, I think we're definitely behind in the race here, but I think this is all about data and really taking these large amounts of data that you see on the battlefield and making sure we can process it more quickly. That's where AI provides a competitive advantage. And if you think about the geopolitical landscape and the area of operations that we're dealing with in a potential conflict with China,
It looks like we're having a little bit of technical difficulty there with our live shot. We will go ahead to go to break and come back after the show.
All right, and we are back with Gordon Lawson, CEO of cybersecurity company Conceal. Gordon, so let's just pick up where we left off. The U.S. is way behind China in terms of AI. How do we make that up?
Well, I think more cooperation between the DoD and the government and the private sector is critical. But I think we got to be careful. Cooperation doesn't mean regulation. We need to encourage innovation. We all know the private sector is going to move faster than the government can on this, and so investment into private companies. And one of the things that I'm most concerned about is really the ability for AI to create disinformation. And I think if we had potentially a foreign adversary using one of our senior officials and putting out false information, that could quickly move to a kinetic conflict, a shooting war, if you will. So that's something we really need to watch out for as the government gets its arms around this.
Gordon, beyond disinformation, what do you see as the worst case scenario in terms of AI military technology going awry? You know, I think many of us probably envision something like the Terminator playing out in real life. Is that something that we should be concerned about?
I'm not as concerned about that, but I'll say this: the new Mission Impossible movie is out, and I was watching the last one just this week. There's a scene in there where they fake a newscaster, and they're talking about a catastrophic event going on in the world. Now, in that case, the good guys were doing this, and I think that maybe that series was a little bit ahead of its time on this. But just think about someone hijacking a major news network and talking about an event, and people not being able to tell the difference. I think that is really the bigger concern than a Terminator type scenario or machines taking over. There's so much data out there. You just need a little snippet of someone's voice to have really catastrophic geopolitical effects. And I think we need to really watch out for that disinformation on a large global scale.
Yeah, the implications are huge, and just the potential to stir major confusion and questions of truth it creates. Gordon Lawson, CEO of Conceal, thank you so much. It's great to have you with us tonight.
Thanks, Gordon.
Thank you. Likewise, pleasure.
Well, No Labels, that is the name of a rising political movement planning to shake up the 2024 election.
Yeah, the group's objective is to move both parties away from extremist agendas and back towards the center.
And Jenna, there's even talk of a third-party unity ticket if the choice comes to a showdown between Biden and Trump again. Chief Political Analyst David Brody has the story.
Headlines are touting the potential impact of No Labels as it lays the groundwork of a possible unity ticket in 2024. Civil rights leader Dr. Benjamin Chavis, an ordained minister and former CEO of the NAACP, is navigating political waters to support the centrist effort.
The reason why I'm moving to the center with No Labels is because I want to see further change. I want to see our nation do better. I want to see our nation open up more opportunities for all of God's people.
No Labels has been a Capitol Hill presence for years, supporting the House Problem Solvers Caucus. It's helped lead to bipartisan achievements like the recent infrastructure bill. As 2024 approaches, members believe Americans want a moderate, common-sense alternative and point to polling that shows nearly 60% of citizens would support a centrist presidential candidate. Critics push back on those numbers.
I know 538, which is a political organization, some others have said, now the middle's actually not that big.
The good news is the middle is growing. The middle is expanding, and it's intergenerational. Millennials, Generation Z, but also elders, middle-aged people.
No matter how big or small, No Labels believes these voters really don't want to see another Trump-Biden rematch.
What is it about that rematch that has No Labels concern exactly?
I would like to see President Biden move more to the center, not to the left. And I would even like to see former President Trump move more to the center, away from the extreme. So let's see what will happen. What I predict is we're going to stir a national discussion about these issues.
And they've got tens of millions of dollars to do just that. Right now, the priority is getting on the ballot in all 50 states. They're on a handful so far, about 5, with more to come. Next spring, they will announce final plans at their convention in Dallas.
We're going to discern whether or not a unity ticket, that is a Republican and a Democrat or a Democrat and a Republican, if that ticket has a pathway to win the majority of the Electoral College votes.
While they won't name names on that ticket, Monday in New Hampshire, centrist Democrat Joe Manchin headlines a kickoff event announcing their new common sense policy book for America. With former Maryland Republican Governor Larry Hogan also a no labels guy, the group is triggering both political parties.
You're getting fire from all sides, but
we're getting fire from both sides of the aisle.
Right.
Right now, probably more fire from the Democrats.
Right.
Because they are nervous that somehow we would tip the balance
over to Trump
in favor of former President Trump.
Dr. Chavis's resume dates back to the 1960s as part of Dr. Martin Luther King's civil rights movement.
When he made his I Have a Dream speech, it was undergirded by his faith in Jesus Christ as coming to heal, restore, and resurrect humanity from self-destruction. And I think that we need that today more than ever before.
You think he would be a no labels guy today?
Oh, absolutely.
Dr. Chavis also is convinced that in today's political atmosphere, we need to hate less and love more.
We may disagree on some political, but you're not my enemy because we disagree on something political.
All right, courageous canine to the rescue. Still ahead, how one lab became a local hero.
And finally tonight, a Pennsylvania community is sleeping a little sounder tonight thanks to Tucker, a 6-year-old lab who helped end a 9-day manhunt for a suspected murderer.
Yeah, last weekend, Tucker was on his back patio with his owners, Ron and Cindy, when he bolted into the woods and began barking loudly. Ron and Cindy followed the sound of his bark to a man hiding in the trees, quickly realizing it was the homicide and arson suspect who escaped jail more than a week ago. The couple called the police, and the man was arrested shortly after. The courageous canine received a $2,000 reward and a steak dinner.
I was just about to say Tucker was deserving of some kind of treat.
Yeah.
I mean, the steak dinner, but $2,000.
Good for him. That whole community can probably rest a little easier now.
Yeah, and he's in for a lifetime of treats.
Yeah. All right, that's going to do it for Faith Nation.
Good night.